right, so let's get started with our next talk. So I am Dr. Staci Benson. I opened up my direct primary care practice in Dallas, Texas in December 2016. Today I have brought my husband, Phillip Brenner, who looks a little different than that photo that was up there. He is not a doctor. He is not my practice manager. He is just my spouse and has a real job. We are also parents to 3 children, one of which is our 11-week-old son. So shout out to Hampton for being great during the conference. And so we're here to talk to you today about what we went through as we started the practice, the good things, the bad things, and really go over the business of the practice. So talking about finances. We only have about 40 minutes to go through this today. We could do a full 4 days of this and still not cover everything that you potentially need to know about finances. So feel free to ask us questions afterwards. We're going to go a little quick, and let's get started.
Let's do it. So yeah, I think the point of the talk today was to just do some basic blocking and tackling from a business perspective. And also kind of talk a little bit about our family balance and kind of the experiences we had trying to figure out what this DPC monster was. Considering that this was something that I know Staci had been looking to do for a while, it definitely kind of happened faster than I was comfortable with. So we're going to share a little bit of those experiences with you today, along with some good ways to think about new opportunities that may come up through your clinic to stay flexible and stay profitable.
So when I was in college, really in high school, I decided I wanted to be a family medicine doctor and open a cash pay business. I had never heard of direct primary care. I had heard of concierge medicine, which didn't really fit with what I was trying to do. So when we met in college, this was the ultimate plan, was to get into medical school, have a cash-based business. It was going to be fee-for-service at the time, but that was the goal. Got through residency. That was still the plan. It was going to be a fee-for-service cash clinic only. And then I went ahead and we got pregnant at the end of residency versus in residency, and didn't get our free baby like everybody else. But so I decided instead to go work at an urgent care to save up money while we worked on our business plan for the practice. That didn't go how I thought it was going to go. I got burnt out really fast. And so at about 1.5 years in, I came home crying. I noticed I was crying going to work. I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning, everything everybody talks about. And I was like, this is ridiculous. I am 1.5 years in, the thing that I've worked my entire life to do, right? I've wanted to be a doctor since I was 5, and I don't think I can do it. This is not a job for me. So came home. We had a 6-month-old baby at the time, and Phil said, no, you can't do that. You have a lot of student loans. He was not on board with it. So a little bit more time went on. I got worse and worse and worse. And then finally one day, I convinced him at the spur of the moment to go to a direct primary care conference. And he said, okay, I get it. I get why you need to do this. Let's figure out how we're going to do it. So on the plane ride home, we started our business plan. And I wrote my 2 weeks notice. And he told me, you have to get another job to pay your student loans before you can quit your job. So I had 2 new jobs by the next day. A motivated doctor can do anything. And we turned in our 2 weeks notice, and then Phil started trying to help me learn how to run a business. Oh, we should add, he's a commercial real estate banker by trade. So he deals with finances, pro formas, all the stuff we're going to talk about every single day, versus I never see this stuff, even though I was a business minor in college. So, all right.
Thank you. So yeah, obviously one of the things you want to do when you talk about family dynamics is making sure that your household is in good working order from a financial perspective. I will repeat, I did not want to do this. I am a DPC victim. I'm on stage right now talking to you about something I thought I'd never have to go through. But we knew, based on your experiences, something that there wasn't another choice. If Staci was going to stay in the medical profession, we had to do something. And so we rolled up our sleeves. We made a balance sheet. We found out, I already knew this, but Staci found out how much money we spent every month.
I didn't know.
We found out how much money we made every month, and we tried to set aside enough money to give ourselves enough breathing room to open up a small business.
So one of the things that many of the people in this room probably have is student loans. So I was paying a few $1,000s without giving an actual number every month for my student loans. So I couldn't keep doing that if I was going to take a job where I made zero, right? So we had to do some financial engineering, which luckily Phil was creative enough for.
Yeah, and just to kind of breeze through this a little bit. So we talked about making your budget, staying liquid. Obviously, the people in here didn't go to school to learn about finance. Target your support network. Find people who do this for a living. You are all very smart people. If you went to medical school, you probably went to school with smart people who went into business. Talk to them. They're going to help you through these kinds of things. Ultimately, your family budget is going to be your first business pro forma. So you need to start there, and then you go and develop your business pro forma after that's in good order. So this is one example for us that we went through. As Staci alluded to, the largest issue for our family was the mountain of student debt that she had acquired through medical school, which I think some of you may have as well. So we had to find a way to stay flexible, stay liquid, and also manage that obligation in a way that allowed enough of a runway for us to start a small business without us having to burn out of cash in the first 6 months. So what we did is we got a home equity line of credit from our house. I'd owned a house from my early 20s. There's a good amount of appreciation in the asset. Used that line of credit to pay down her student loans, to pay off a car note that was costing us, a significant amount of money each month. And the net effect of that was that we saved enough money per month that we could actually afford the new clinic lease that we had signed.
And this took me a long time to figure out because I wasn't grasping, all I saw was our car note was a 0% interest. My student loans were a 2% interest, right? It took me a while to understand that we have to look at our budget on a month-to-month basis to make sure that we have enough income coming in for that month in order to make our household work. And so this was really important because when we were opening the clinic, and as we were going to talk about, we felt one of the most important things to do was to stay liquid and to make sure that you kept your overhead as low as possible. We were really big into making sure we had an exit strategy, so if this clinic failed, our family wouldn't fail too. We wanted to make sure we set ourselves up as best as possible. So by doing something like this, and not saying that everyone goes out and does a home line of credit or anything, but by doing something like this, we were able to say our income will be okay. We can absorb the rent for the clinic, even if nobody's using the rent for the clinic because of the financial engineering that we did.
Yeah, not to belabor the point. Two important things on the slide. One, it was zero cash out from us. We did not put any capital in to pay down any of the different categories of debt that are on that chart there, which is important, stay liquid. And also, we had access to another line of credit, which was essentially an early on working capital line for us in case we needed more money than we thought we'd need starting out the business. So kind of a win-win. Okay, so this is something I actually really enjoy. I love pro formas. It's kind of my jam. I know when Staci talked about opening up a DPC clinic, one of the first things I said was, okay, what are we gonna do to create a pro forma? How are we gonna know how this business model is out over the next 2 or 3 years? And when I said the word pro forma, Staci said,
What's a pro forma?
And I've learned, I should have expected that reaction. I didn't think I was going to get that.
And his answer was, go read that textbook over there. And I said, no.
That a lot of doctors, and there's no reason you would. A lot of you may not have come across a pro forma before. And so wanted to do a quick introduction of pro forma as a business tool, as something to make decisions and to evaluate the health of your business over time. So let's get into a quick example. So when you hear about P&L statements or you hear about income statements and then you hear the word pro forma, really you're talking about the same thing. The only difference that a pro forma does versus the other two things that I said is that it's a forward-looking projection, okay? So you're essentially modeling out the cash flows, the operating cash flows of your business, revenues over operating expenses over a period of time that you want to view. Usually it's a year, 2 years, 3 years. We actually did 3 years for our initial business plan. And so it allows you to test a ton of variables and kind of get a sense of what your baseline expectations are for a business, and allows you to look at a stress case. If things don't actually model out the way you thought they would, you have a better understanding of where your positive cash flow is going to be. These are really important things to know if you want to run a business. So here's a quick example. Hopefully the chart's not too small. It looks a little small. It's a very simple pro forma where we are testing essentially 3 or 4 variables. Essentially, we said a full panel of 600. You have one salary of 45,000. I have an office space with a rental rate associated with it. You can either flex the net rentable square foot or the rentable amount, and then with all those variables, you put it into the charts. It will model out month over month, year over year, and tell you where your break-even's going to be. It's going to tell you how much money you're going to make in 3 years, generally. And it's a good way to kind of set an example for where your business is going to be in 2 or 3 years.
And to go back to the slide that he was just on that clicked through so fast.
Yep.
So one thing that we always, when we're talking to docs that are looking at opening this is a business, right? You shouldn't, as the owner of the business, you should not expect to bring home a meaningful salary compared to what you were making in those first few years, right? Even if you're going to start making good revenue, you are probably going to be reinvesting it back into the business because you're going to want to grow most likely, right? So when our examples here, notice that the operating income is a negative for the first year, and this is without any physician salary in it. This is only with one staff member's salary. And we over budgeted for that staff member on these examples. But that's one staff, no physician. So even at our year 3 example here, there is still only one staff member that's gotten pay raises, but there's only one staff member in that example. So now you have a net income after our operating expenses of $250,000. Well, and again, this is complete examples. You would manipulate this for your own situation, but now you can take a salary. Versus year 2, you could take money home. There's only $80,000, but if you decide that you want to do anything different, what if you want to buy a new piece of equipment? What if you go see this really cool ultrasound and you want to buy it, right? That's coming out of that $80,000. And so it's a hit for your own revenue you're taking home for your own paycheck. Does that make sense? Okay.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll talk about in terms of a pro forma, I know this is maybe a little dense, maybe it's not, and we're going through it pretty quickly. Just want to make sure you have some working knowledge of what this is. There are a lot of templates out there you can use. Anyone in this room can put this together, I promise. Really where the majority of our strategic decisions from a business perspective come from is looking at the actual performance of our business on the P&Ls versus what the projections were going to be over the same period of time. Either we're trending in the right direction or we're not, and we need to figure out why. So that's been really a great resource for us.
Mm-hmm. So when we're looking at our pro forma, we had to figure out what were some of the big things you need to put in your pro forma. So it came down to 2 fixed expenses that we tried to decide what to do. So we just want to briefly touch on these. So the biggest one was finding the office space. We are in metropolitan Dallas. It is not cheap rent there. Even if you go to the suburbs, it's still not cheap. I hear definitely some of our DPC friends and their rents, and I'm very jealous. I have a tiny little office space, and it's not very cheap. It's actually restricted to even grow because of that in terms of overhead for how much that we charge per month. So it's important when you're looking at this pro formas, don't listen to everybody else. You need to look at your own market. What is it going to cost to have a space in your market? And then be creative. You don't need a 2,100 square foot office space if you're going to be a solo doc, right? I have 800 square feet, and honestly, it's more than I really need. I do wish now that I've fully grown that I have a bigger space, but up until now, that space was perfectly sufficient, and I didn't have to worry about that being a part of my overhead cost. Phil wanted to go through some of the things that he sees in leases.
Yeah, and I think something else that's important to point out, I've talked to plenty of doctors who have just signed a lease without negotiating it. No, you can always negotiate a lease. The landlord will always work with you on some points. Also do some research on your market. There's a lot of great resources out there that are free. If your market is soft, if the vacancies are high, you'll have more leverage in tenant allowance packages, right? The idea is to spend less money to start up your practice. So if you're working with landlords willing to give you more money to set up your shop, that's a win. And then in terms of flexibility in your lease, subleasing is a great right to have on your lease. You probably do want that. In terms of business assets and guarantees, we've been successful in negotiating leases without pledging business assets. Without signing any personal guarantees.
Meaning if the business fails, they can't come after me personally, even though I'm the only member of the business.
So just be mindful of these things. These are just examples of negotiations you can have. You don't just have to sign the lease that they give you.
And Oh, the Small Business Administration can go through a lot of this with you too. And then talk to other business owners in your community for who does real estate law, so they can help you with lease negotiation if you need it. In our town, there was no way we were gonna try and negotiate, there's people that negotiate free lease for care. That was not going to happen in Dallas. We also were negotiating with large investment firms who own the buildings that we were talking to. So we needed a lawyer to help us in order to negotiate. We weren't, my lease is 57 pages. I just sent it to somebody this week and they're like, are you kidding me? Right, it's a 57-page lease. Something else to think about, whether or not you do this, is we wanted our exit strategy. So again, we wanted to make sure our family was financially sound if we ended up closing the practice. We're the worst case scenario people. So we only signed a 3-year lease. We gave ourselves 3 years to succeed. Now we made sure there was something in the lease where we could renew or we could move to a bigger space at the end of those 3 years and we wouldn't be stuck on our, booties at 3 years. But that 3 years was really important versus we've had friends that have done 7-year leases because they got more TI money. And then they ended up closing and now they didn't have it in their lease where they can sublet. So now they're responsible for that lease even though they've closed their doors and have taken on another job, okay?
Yeah, always have a bias towards flexibility, have a bias towards liquidity.
So then we have to look at hiring. So whether or not you hire, we just came off a really good talk. There's nothing wrong with being a solo doc right when you start up. I was in that little PowerPoint and I told you that I hired somebody and I regret it. Now I have somebody and it was fabulous. So the day that I knew to hire somebody was the day I came home and I said, I've spent my entire day doing stuff that a doctor should not be doing. And so that's when we started looking. It took about a month before we found somebody, and we found a fabulous MA, and she has been a great fit and has taken a lot of that weight off of me. But don't hire somebody till you need to, because that's a big piece of, on that pro forma, a big piece of your operating expenses. So think about it. And then, again, know your market. And if you're not sure, you can always talk to people that are in the fee-for-service world or urgent care world. Know what MAs are paid, know what LVNs are paid, know what your RNs are paid, your NPs, your PAs, whoever you're gonna hire, know what the market is. Don't let them, which we saw, they'll come in and try. It's a business, right? They're trying to get the best pay for a job. They will come in and want to be paid more than what the market's asking for them to be paid potentially, right? So, and then that's also going to make sure that you're paying appropriately within the market so that way you can get someone that's good. So you might be in a market where people are paid very well and then you didn't budget for that good salary. And so now you're not going to be able to find a staff person that's what you're looking for because it didn't fit your pro forma, okay? Setting your price is very important, and while there is a general direct primary care price that a lot of people use, and I'll go over that in a second, we have found that you have to be very important, again, knowing your market, okay? We've actually had the opposite problem for some people. When we go out into our neighborhood that we're in, people tell us over and over, you're for the poor people. We don't need you. If it's only $75 a month or whatever it is for their age range, which is all on my website, but if it's only that much a month, you can't be worth anything, right? So it's the complete opposite versus when you go lobby on the hill, it's a DPCs for the rich people, right? We have the complete opposite experience in our market. We've seen somebody have to close their doors, which they were told over and over by patients, I love you though, that you should raise your price. And I still to this day think she should have raised her price for this exact reason, because her market wanted to pay more. They saw it as a concierge practice and they didn't align the lower price point with it. So make sure you understand. The other thing is if my prices are going to look the same as somebody that's in rural West Texas, their rent is obviously going to be a lot less, their cost of living is lower, so their salaries are generally lower, right? I, therefore, will not be able to make as much money unless I have a much higher patient load, which then you're not going to be able to provide the same amount of care if you have a much higher patient load, because I set the same kind of prices. So make sure you're looking at this in your pro forma, and when you're designing that Excel spreadsheet, make it so you can mess with that variable. Okay, and when we did ours, we said our average patient would pay X. We are $8 below that average patient. So we've come up from that, but even our pro forma, we didn't get the patient panel distribution that we thought we would.
Right, so I think in summary, spend time on the price, do your research, markets drive the price. We just happen to operate in a very robust concierge market, and so we got some feedback we did not expect. And I think, and we'll get to this later about things we did wrong. We did misprice, and it's taken us a couple years to get out of that. So just take your time with it, do your research, and that'll generally give you kind of the best range that you should be operating in.
So these next few slides, these are the ones to take your pictures of. So this is just real quick when you think about your goals for your pricing in that budget. We had 3 goals in mind. So when are we going to be able to meet our business overhead? When are we going to be able to meet our overhead plus pay my student loans, because that was our family's biggest thing? When are we going to be able to do those 2 plus add a staff member? And when are we going to be able to pay me? Right, so we actually had 4 goals for budgeting, and we knew exactly how many patients per our average that we would need in order to be able to hit each of those things. Okay, so we had different goals in mind. So like I considered my business successful once it was operating on its own and my student loans were covered. And then it was even more successful once I could hire a staff and not having to pull money out of savings for that. And then once we were able to take a salary, a meaningful salary, then it was successful again. Does that make sense? So be realistic on it. Don't just make your goal for your budget and with everything at one time. So with trying to think about your pricing, go to the next slide. So you first need to decide how many days a week you want to be working, how long you want your visits to be, and then you need to decide how many visits you would have based on that, right? So this is just simple math. You can do it across. So assuming that a patient is going to come 4 times a year, and I will tell you most patients need me way more than 4 times a year. They're not always coming in, but they do need me. If I had 45-minute visits on average and I was working, could do 12 visits a day at that point, then I could see 690 patients. I would have enough time slots open for that. Does that make sense, how this math is working out? Versus if you always want to do 90-minute visits, you could, and the patients needed you 4 times a year for a 90-minute visit, you would only have enough appointment slots for 345 patients, okay? Next slide. So use that to kind of think about it. Phil SQ on his DPC Frontier website has a case study where he went back in 2015 and looked through every single open DPC practice that he could find and then took their pricing and averaged it out. And so the mean clinic fee back in 2015 was $77. I have not seen it done since then, but if we're going to, now we know how many patients we can see based on the type of clinic experience you want. So look at that number of patients. So let's use our 345 example. If you're charging an average $40 a month per patient, you only have 300 patients. That is $144,000 of net revenue. After 12 months, not just month 1, right, but after 12 months, well, you're gonna have a pretty low overhead in order to make any money off of $144. So do your math, and this is just a simple graph here, to figure out what your average monthly fee should be per patient. And yes, you are guessing on what your patient panel distribution is going to be if you're going to do age ranges. Not everyone does age ranges. Some people just do a set price and everybody pays the same amount of money. Just be creative with how you want, but when you're thinking about what you're going to be setting your prices at, keep this in mind. And then finally, sorry, I didn't put this last slide in there, thinking about your overhead, and so planning out your monthly overhead and make sure you have extra cushion in that overhead for the month before you go and decide what you want your total revenue to be, because I've seen it where people go, oh, that's how much I want to make. And they totally forgot about all of their overhead, which seems silly, but I've seen it happen. So make sure you don't forget about your overhead and provide cushion. What if you have to go buy a new refrigerator and you weren't expecting that expense, right? Same as your home budget, you provide savings, you provide cushion. So we talked about your pro forma, and you're going to be trying to budget how you're going to grow, year 1, year 2, year 3. This is all a guess. There's another talk that happened today that was about what happens when you grow rapidly, right? And so you're drinking from that fire hose again versus drinking from a little trickle from a faucet. But we tried our best to guess. We thought we were going to grow at 30 patients a month. Did not happen. And so we had to continue to reassess. So make sure you're always looking back at that pro forma for your growth, and then looking at your numbers and seeing if you need to tweak anything in terms of your moonlighting, you can change your prices. Right now, I wouldn't recommend changing your prices every year or every few months, but you could change your prices. Do we need to talk about other solutions so that you can get to what you need your number to be?
So I think this is a nice way to illustrate some of the things that we're working through right now. As Staci gets more full in her panel, she has less time to go out and market and do business development, right? So if you see a flattening in the curve there, well, there's 2 things that happened. One, we had another kid, right, which takes time away from an ability to grow the business. And two, she got to a saturation point where she had a hard time getting through the amount of patients she was working with every day and still going out to her networks and being in front of businesses every week. So you need to plan for that. There are different ways to do gearing ratios or depending on how you kind of want to scale your business. Just know that when you grow your panel, you're going to have less time to focus on business development. But generally, it's something that you're going to have to work through in order to maintain the rate of growth that you originally thought you were going to have.
So as you can see, and this is just a rough estimation for our patients, but per our pro forma when we opened, that lovely green line was what we thought we would do for growth, because of course everyone's going to join the practice and love it and no one's going to ever leave it, right? But the blue is kind of our rough what happened. And if you'll notice there's a few dips. That 15-month dip, that's my first kid being born. Looking back when we made this, I was shocked. That 15-month dip is my first child, which I only took a week off for people that know me, and I can go into this in a second, but that's my first child. And then you'll see another dip. That's when we decided to take a third-party opportunity, which we're going to talk about in a second. We weighed on this for forever, trying to decide if we were going to do it, and we decided to do it. But then you see I plateaued again when I took that on, because I took on a large influx of patients, but my private panel slowed. And then there's one more dip here at the 35-month mark, or 34-ish month mark. That's my second kid being born. So, and now it's starting to go back up. So it's crazy with this rough, this is not like pulled exact data, but even with our rough pulling of data, I could not believe that it actually hit right on the months for everything that happened. So we were at the point, which is why we have that green arrow there, where we had to decide what we were going to do, because it wasn't the practice that I thought I was going to open back in 2016 that was growing the way I thought it was going to grow. So we had to decide, are we going to continue how we're going? We were having growth. We were having about 5 to 6 patients every month net growth. So we weren't stagnant, but we sure weren't growing at a rate we thought we would grow. So we were trying to decide if we were going to bring in something else to bring in revenue on like an extra service we were going to bring in and charge additional amounts for it, if we were going to open up to non-members for different services, or I know we've all seen it, there are tons of third parties, tons of networks out there, and by third parties, I'm not meaning insurance groups, but people that are trying to help place like employer clients places. And so previously I'd been resistant to all of these things, and then it was, okay, we got to figure out what we're going to do, because now we have 2 kids. Now which was not in the plan for the pro forma. We got to figure out if I'm going to keep moonlighting, because I'd really like to be at home more. So we have to rearrange. And so every time you're thinking about if you're going to bring something else into your clinic, whether it's a staff, whether it's opening up a bigger location, whether it's buying a nice large piece of equipment, you should be doing a pro forma. And I can say I haven't been the smartest at it. One of our examples was I came home one day, me and another doctor decided that we had both had slow growth but slow growth, and so we wanted to bring in an extra revenue source. And we went through all our different options and looked at the market to see what was there and what wasn't there and what kind of pricing we would do, and listened to the salespeople. And I talked to other doctors that had these different services in their clinics already and saw what their numbers looked like. And I came home one day and I said, Phil, I want to buy a laser.
It was great. Yeah. Yeah.
So luckily my husband, because me and the other doc both thought it was a great idea. We had done our performance. It made complete sense how we were going to make money. And Phil said, how much does a laser cost? I had no idea until we went through this, but I didn't think it was a big deal. In hindsight, I don't know what I was thinking, but $180,000, right?
That's what I said.
But both of us, 2 doctors sat and went through everything. We had made our budget, and we said this makes complete sense for us to open. Luckily, both of our husbands, who are not doctors, turned to both of us that night and went, you're idiots. And so they went through our pro forma, went with us, and then redid it as if we didn't have the growth that we were thinking we would have from a service, the same way neither of our clinics grew the way we thought they would grow, and then talked about what it was going to be in terms of monthly impacts and what that meant in terms of trying to make sure we got that revenue in. And it was, wow, these are all things that we talked about back when we opened for even just rent. And we, again, feel stupid, didn't think about all of those things as we were looking at this great potential money-making source. Right? I'd even surveyed patients to see if they'd liked it. Like, I thought I had really done all of my due diligence before I came home to say, hey, we're going to buy a big expense. So we didn't. I do not have a laser in my clinic at this time. But when we also went to go get a bigger space this year, same thing. We went through and we decided not to expand our space based on what we were seeing in the market for rent. So we're just holding tight. We've done it with hiring extra staff, hiring on doctors, with a number of things. So we wanted to show you an example of what you're looking at because you want to do a cost-benefit analysis.
So the laser didn't make it on the chart because it did deserve to be on the chart. But we did think about adding aesthetics as something that we thought might be a viable revenue stream outside of kind of our normal subscription model. And we took a look at our demographics. Again, our market, Dallas, is a very saturated aesthetic market. Clients are very savvy about the cost of what things should cost, and that drives your margins down. Also, based on talking to our members, we knew that the total amount of volume you might get in every month might not be enough to justify adding it as a service, because ultimately the amount of people we'd have to get through our doors meant that we'd almost have to be running a separate business, right? We might even need to think about having a separate entrance. We might need to think about much nicer finishes in the office, all things that cost a lot of money. And you gotta think about what's the return on that, right? So this chart just shows the only variable that I'm changing with is volume from left to right. If you look at column A, that's low volume, column C is high volume, and you can see how the revenue changes. I think our decision was, if it raises, like if the revenue rises to a threshold that's meaningful, that's something you should think about. If it does that and attracts members, 3, 4, 5 a month, that's something you should act on. We didn't think it got to that level. We think we're closer to the A column than the C column, but this is something we're always kind of thinking about depending on the feedback we're getting from our clients.
And you could take something like this and do it for anything, right? And these are obviously on the numbers. Those are not the actual numbers that are in there, but you can play with it. Make sure that your charts have calculations in it, so it's really easy when you change one calculation, it changes all of them. I know that seems like it's common sense, but a lot of people don't do it, and then they're manually changing all of them. So we just wanted to briefly talk about third-party opportunities, because I do get a lot of criticism for it from people. There are pros and cons to it. Please be careful when you're looking at them. Make sure you're reading all the contracts very diligently. Consider even having a lawyer look at the contract with you. There's lots of different variables that you should consider, but it's going to be clinic dependent and doctor dependent on what those variables should be. There are pros and there are cons. For us, it made sense because it was what we decided was, looking at all these different calculations, the smartest way we felt in order to make sure that we would have good revenue coming into our clinic. So I'm happy to answer more questions on that, but know that there are good and bad ones that are out there, and there are tons of them out there as you open. As a new practice that's getting ready to open, if you have 0 patients pre-signed up, you're month 1, you're in the red, right? If you open up with pre-signed up patients, you are potentially not in the red when you open, which would have made a drastic difference on that pro forma. A drastic difference. So there are these networks that are out there that can bring you patients, and so you don't have to worry about pre-sign up. But again, really know what you're getting into.
And pricing and utilization with these companies is key too. But I think something else that's definitely worth thinking about, again, know your market, who's operating in the market. I speak to a lot of large private companies on a regular basis. When they think about what DPC is, because again, people are still trying to understand what this model is, they're generally being introduced to what that concept is by companies like these, because they're having direct dialogues with them and they're trying to scale it to a point where
make sure you know what the broker's
easily
selling.
digestible for a lot of companies in the area. So you should know who they are and how they're defining these terms, because ultimately when people come look at you, they're going to assume you're going to be a similar price point and a similar amount of services.
So these slides will be available. So finally, make sure you have an exit strategy. So what are you going to do if it doesn't work out? We would hope that you continue to try and pivot and find solutions for your practice, but don't let your family die with this. This is not a reason to get divorced. This is not a reason to feel burnt out again, and you can. There's no reason you can't feel burnt out in direct primary care. I've felt it. The beautiful part is you can pivot. So I got to come home and go, I don't feel right today. I feel burnt out. And it's not just one day. Why do I feel this way? How do I change it? And we changed it. So whether it was stuff at home, it was Phil needed to step up and do more stuff at home. I couldn't just be the primary parent anymore. Or we needed to change the workflow in the office. We've done it multiple times where we've changed things. And I do tell all my patients, my family comes first. My goal in my practice is to practice medicine and have it a simple practice. But my family will come first. You are part of my family. You are my extended family, and I will do my best to take care of you. but I did this so that I could have a good work-life balance. So we did a few things right, we feel, and we did a few things that were wrong. So biggest things were ask for help. Don't assume you can do everything. You're not a Superman. You don't need to go take a semester accounting course at a college so that you know how to do your accounting. You don't.
We've heard someone that did that.
You do not need to go attend marketing CME at conferences so that you're the one that does all of your marketing because you're the best doing marketing. We've heard someone that's done that too, okay? Ask for help, there's nothing wrong with that. And then we did do just some things wrong. We didn't get pre-sign-ups before opening. Like I said, that would have drastically changed how our pro forma looked. We weren't very flexible at first with how we were going to grow the business because again, this is what we were going to do, this was going to work. We were going to have private patients sign up, 30 people a month were going to come in, and we were going to grow organically with just good networking versus thinking about other ways that you could creatively bring people in the door, okay? And then we should have, in hindsight, really worked to decrease our family personal debt even more because that would have taken a little more burden off of us. So I don't know if I could have made it another year making a traditional doctor's salary, but if you can, or just even a few more months and stock that away, that's more money your family has in case you don't get the growth you're expecting, or in case you want to turn around and reinvest in your company and not take that salary instead, right? You are the business owner. If this was a bakery, someone has to bake those muffins. You're the doctor, someone's got to take care of the patients, right? Your patients and your customers are not going to be happy if you're not there. So whether it's you're having a baby, whether it's you want to go on vacation, you're going to have to find solutions for it to work. But make sure you're flexible and you have the cash available so that way you can still make muffins if you're not selling enough muffins. Otherwise, you will close your doors. And that's your rah-rah optimistic. So the next speaker we have on our panel is Dr. Sidney Coupet. He is down here in Florida versus all the way over in Texas with us. And we're going to have questions after Sidney speaks. And Sidney.
Awesome, awesome. Hello, everybody. My name is Sidney Coupet, and I'm happy to be here. Looks like we have a lot of phenomenal people here this weekend. It's a long weekend so far, so I know we're coming down to the wire here. Actually, if anyone could do me a favor, let's everybody stand up for a moment, if you don't mind. Just stand up, stretch, wake everyone up a little bit. Oh, I think I moved too quickly. All right, good. Now, I think I've met most people, not too many people, but I look forward to keep meeting everyone. All right, so now that we all stood, I have a question to ask everyone. Now, have anyone read The Black Swan? Oh, good, one person. Oh, that's great. Well, you know, Nassim Taleb wrote The Black Swan. He's an economist. He might actually kill me to call him an economist, knowing the type of guy he is. Everyone can sit down now, actually. Just wanted you guys to have a chance to participate with me. The Black Swan is about a book that talks about rare events that occur with huge consequences that are extremely consequential. So, for instance, everyone would agree that 9/11 was a very rare event that had huge consequences. World War II, even an earthquake, for instance, rare events that could have huge consequences. You know, one of the things also Nassim Taleb talked about was this concept of fragility in the sight of these huge consequences, which he calls black swan. So we are all fragile to a black swan event, and 9/11 was one of them. So we bring this up because Nassim talks about how to become anti-fragile. And this is the theme of my talk this morning, to say how can our direct primary care practices become what we call, so to speak, anti-fragile. And so, you know, first of all, our mindset is going to have to change. Before we do anything, our mindset's going to have to change. So first of all, forget about making predictions, okay? Forget that. Don't be an expert, don't be a hero. Forget predictions. It's a fallacy, right? Now, also, understand that rare events are going to happen. Expect them. As a practitioner, this is the place we need to stay. stay in the realm of understanding that rare events can occur anytime, because that's going to influence our actions, and I'll talk more about that in a bit in our conversation here. Lastly, don't be a turkey. I'm sure everyone heard that expression before, right? So I recently was introduced to that expression probably 2 years ago, believe it or not. And I heard it all my life, but don't be a turkey. But I really understood what that meant. Because turkeys, for the most part, have you ever been to a turkey farm? Well, from what I gathered, the farmers, they say feeding turkeys is what they do. Every day they feed a turkey. And the turkey comes to them, and it's expected, so they come. They don't have to chase a turkey to feed them. And what happens is that on Thanksgiving, right, they also don't have to chase them to chop their heads off. You get that? So they come in expected to be fed. And therefore, that's the turkey phenomenon. So don't be a turkey, all right? Now, there's a lot of conversations being had. And if there's anything I want to just take away from this conversation, if you don't remember anything I said in this conversation, just remember 3 things, okay? Number 1, don't make predictions, okay? Number 2, practice all the optionalities that there is. Practice all the options there are to grow a practice. Get involved. Be in action in all the possible options, okay? And number 3, introduce competition at every level in your practice. So these are the three takeaways that I want you to have from this conversation, okay? Now, the way I'm going to do this is, I was asked before that don't ask somebody what their thoughts are. Don't ask them their opinions. You need to ask them what's in their portfolio, because that's how you really learn. That's how you really grasp from things, not from an expert telling you this is what you should do. Because direct primary care is local. Direct primary care is based on your community. And it's going to be different for everyone in here. So when Dr. Gross asked me to make a talk about how to grow a DPC, I thought about it. I said, anyone here could come up and talk about that. Any one of you guys could. And especially those who have already started their primary care practice. You can talk about that because you are the expert, right? Based on your community. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples of how we can move our practice from becoming fragile when these rare events occur and skipping this idea of being robust to something called anti-fragile. So, for instance, recruiting patients. When we first started, I'm an internist. I started as a hospitalist, a physician. So it was easy, In the hospital, I take call, I discharge a patient, they follow up with me. That's how I grew my practice, right? And of course, people I meet in the hospital, that was one way. But yet I was still fragile. The second thing is I was depending on maybe 1 or 2 staff members. Sometimes they were happy. I wasn't paying them enough. But the idea is that they eventually become disgruntled, especially as the numbers started rising in the practice, they had to deal with more. So disgruntled employees is something that you would deal with. But again, you could imagine how fragile I was, right? 1 source of referrals, and then maybe 1 employee that I depended on her. So we lost patients when the rare event happened. She quit, right? So no one was in the office to manage my practice while I was in the hospital. So I realized, my goodness, I need to be more robust. I need to figure this out. I need to develop processes. So step number 2, I became robust. This was happened maybe 3 to 4 months after this. I started my practice. I decided to have a well-defined process around recruiting patients. So instead of giving my card to the patient in the hospital, I got their face sheets and had my office staff call them when they were discharged from the hospital. That's a rigorous process. And it worked. Our membership increased right away. In addition, I created more of team effect in my practice. Instead of depending on 1 person, I asked everyone in the office to learn the same things. In case someone is out, in case someone is sick, we just pick up from where we left off. So my practice was robust. And I'm going to show you some examples here, but you will see that that was not enough for our practices, right? We're smart individuals. We can create systems that make sense, right? But that's not enough. And I started thinking more about this concept that Nassim Taleb was talking about becoming anti-fragile. And I realized to myself, there's more to do. I need to understand where do we get patients. So I started engaging the community more and started doing things more than just depending on the hospital. Started going to church events. Started listening to my patients, getting referrals from them. I go to community events. I speak at business meetings. There's different things that I started doing. And before you know it, referrals was coming from those places as well. And when I take call at the hospital and I got 20 patients in an ER call and all 20 is self-pay and worse, they're having a lot of economic challenges, and I get one person who joined my practice in that call period, I was covered. Because the talk that I did at the church, I had 15 people who joined that month. Again, this concept of becoming anti-fragile. We need to start thinking outside the box, ladies and gentlemen. The second thing is I introduced competition in my office. My staff started to have skin in the game as well. We started looking at how we could reward people for recruiting people, referring patients to the office. People were competing against each other. We made this a game. We had fun. We said, what was your numbers this month? Oh, well, you didn't do too good this month, right? This person was rewarded. Competition, and we all do well when it's to competition, so it works. So that, to me, is an anti-fragile model, an anti-fragile practice, a practice that has many options, and a practice that introduces competition. So, again, let me show you what's in my portfolio. What's our fragile state? So what this graph is showing you is, in a month period, we've tracked this, how many recruitments we've had, and naturally, people will deselect from the program. Now, the demographics that I deal with, right, we are right at that cuff of dealing with people who need charity care and those who could barely afford it. Very challenging. I have my sister, actually, who's in Pennsylvania, who's in a different demographic, where money is really not an issue. And so her experience is different. Important experience, but it's different. So it's important for me to let you know that I am working in a demographic that is very difficult when it comes to economic. And so it's important that I have all my options laid out. So again, the red line is people who leave the program. Expect that. People are going to leave your program. And for the most number one reason why people leave my program is because they can't afford it. So the red line demonstrates that. The blue line demonstrates our ability to refer and recruit patients. So again, during my fragile state, I was depending on the hospital. And the area where I put the markers there was our Black Swan event. There was an economic challenge in the community. All of a sudden, there was an influx or an outflux of patients, right? I lost a lot of patients that month. It hurt me hard, hit my bottom line. That's the Black Swan that I'm talking about. That's what happened when you're fragile. Please pay attention to this. We were not doing any active management. We were not engaging the community, and we lost most of our patients that month. Don't become fragile when a Black Swan hits. So, what was robust for us when we became robust, and it didn't take me long, because as soon as I figured it out, I went into action. Thank goodness that we were a lean model. We didn't have to wait for any bureaucracy before we changed the policies, So we were able to simply make changes, and we did that right away. I was in a robust state. Again, hospital follow-up. I was more efficient. The team effect. Again, processes was in place. Everyone had what we call the hedgehog concept. Does anyone know what a hedgehog concept is? Raise your hand. All right, well, a hedgehog, who knows what a hedgehog is? Got it. So a hedgehog is an animal, right, that is so interesting. When it's threatened or being attacked, a small little animal, like I can't even describe it, with a lot of spikes in the back. And when it's being threatened, it rolls over into a ball. And guess what? The predator runs away. And it does that each time it's threatened. The same process. And it becomes repetitive. So they're using this analogy as a hedgehog concept in business in the sense of if we're able to do the same thing, you attach it to three things. Number one, something that you're very good at, right? You have to be very good at it. Number two, you have to be passionate about it. And number three has to be attached to an economic engine. Those three things can create a hedgehog concept. Again, you have to be good at it, you have to be passionate about it, and it has to bring in some level of revenue. So in business world, they call that the hedgehog concept. And if you do this well, you become a flywheel. And before you know it, what your expectations are or what you're trying to accomplish is more likely to occur. So in the office, we actually drilled that model down with our team members. We had the MA who, her role was to make sure she dispensed medications, she speaks to incoming patients, right? Give them information about what the program entails, right? And she makes follow-up calls when patients leave the office after I come up with a plan for them. That was her hedgehog concept. So the idea is every person had a role. So definitely create some sort of robustness in your office that's going to help you succeed. But again, I'm telling you here today that is not enough. And as you can imagine, look at that area I made a quotation. Although we had an influx, that number, after we introduced more robustness in the practice, we were still subject to getting hurt by that black swan event. Again, you notice another peak went up in the months of September to October where there was a lot of people who left the program. Not as bad as when we were fragile, but again, still impactful, right? So we have to take this a step further. This is anti-fragile, ladies and gentlemen. Accepting that the future is unpredictable and increase the number of different patient recruitment sources. Do not rely on one source. Number two, team is in action and complete among themselves, right? And compete, sorry about that, among themselves. They compete in the hedgehog world. They compete among themselves in playing this game in the world where we're saving lives. So how many lives did you save today? So at the end of the month, we have a staff meeting. We say, how many lives did you save? I saved 5. How did you save 5 lives? They came to the office, we explained to them the program, and you know something, we provided them access that they would not otherwise have. These are people who are uninsured. We're providing them quality, the sense of robustness, and making sure that they adhere to all the chronic disease management that I'm doing in the office, okay? And more importantly, we're addressing costs. We're saving them money, and ultimately we're saving our society, immediate society money. Reducing readmissions to hospitals, reducing unnecessary visits to the ER. That is what we're doing. So that is the robustness that we created in the office, and everybody's hedgehog concept was on point for us to get that to that point. So now, the last thing is communication. There's a lot of communication books out there. I encourage you all to look those up to see how can you introduce communication techniques among your team. It's a lean model. We believe in a 3-team unit, the doctor, an MA, and an admin person. That's how we do our office here in Fort Lauderdale and also our office in Miami. We find that being anti-fragile work for us. We have different options. We can't predict the future, ladies and gentlemen. We cannot. We don't know what's coming down the pipeline, and especially in healthcare today, with everything that's happening in DC, the insurance companies, all those players, we have to be prepared for this. So the more options we have as DPC practices, this is the way we're gonna win our game. Now, how do you create different referral sources? Well, this is what worked for us in our community. We listened to our community, and these are the options that worked. My favorite is going to the churches and speaking on different health topics. The community I serve, although poor, they're very rich in their faith and belief. There's a lot of faith-based organizations, churches there that do amazing work there. And so it would make no sense for me to be a practitioner in that space, to not engage with them in that fashion, engage with them, understanding and going to them where they are, where they're practicing, to see the importance of how they manage and take care of themselves and what healthcare means to them and what I can do to improve on their lives in that aspect. So that helped. So I enjoy going to the church events, speaking on different topics, et cetera. But again, this is a spread of how we became anti-fragile in about a few months. So, and again, I can't emphasize more, is to tailor your practice towards your community based on their needs. And the next slide will talk to you guys about that. So what we did, we diversified. We created service lines. You know, it's easy to create service lines as a direct primary care provider. You know, I'm a medical marijuana provider because that was a need in our community. All right, our people are looking into these things and they're saying, you know, doc, what do you think about medical marijuana? You know, I do believe about evidence-based medical marijuana and the use of it in that sense. You know, chronic disease, terminally ill, metastatic cancer patients, which I have in my practice. As an extensivist, I have the sick of the sickest, okay? And I take care of them. And what I do as an extensivist is a high-level care coordination for those folks. So medical marijuana makes sense for them because it works. Their friends are doing it, they ask me about it. We have a wellness team that does massage therapists, and now going into functional medicine, but we mostly do vitamins. We have a wellness store, things that you can do. Again, a direct request from our community. We also have behavioral health, have 2 licensed psychologists, amazing psychologists, because we believe without mental health, there's no physical health. We do believe that. It's not a saying for us, because in our community, there's a lot of PTSDs, patients coming from different countries. I have a lot of Venezuelan patients, and if you don't know what's happening in Venezuela right now, I encourage you to look into that. Okay, patients are coming. They are part of our community. People are coming from around the world to live with us here. And we are in the front lines addressing that. And giving them access is one way to helping them and their families. We do e-consults. You know, I have podiatrists coming to the office now, and once a week to see our patients that need podiatry services. We have cardiologists who communicate with me on consult platforms. I mean, we are doing some amazing work, and I couldn't do it without the community. The minute I started listening to my community and listening to their needs, we were able to be relevant. A reason to exist, ladies and gentlemen, a reason to exist. Our employees, as I mentioned earlier, we have a lean model, but one of the interesting things about this, once we started to have skin in the game, once they developed skin in the game, meaning that we started to have that competition on a monthly basis, how many patients they recruited, this is when things started becoming interesting. People value what we do, and they're part of the team, and their work's changed. Their work ethics change. So you don't have to force people to stay with you. You don't have to create complex contracts. Have them want to stay with you, because that's what we created, passion. Recruitment also, which I talked about, improved as well. Again, we developed our practice to be anti-fragile. Now, you know, I play around with this word a lot, but, you know, our only responsibility here, ladies and gentlemen, as we think about building our practice, as we think about growing our practice, the only responsibility we have is to not be a turkey. That's it. There's no science behind this. And what does that mean? So we got to tinker around, tinker enough, tinker with a lot of different things. You have to look at what our patients are asking for and what they're experiencing. We're not creating the problem. The problem exists. So all we have to do is tinker around and we'll find solutions. Number 2, don't be an expert. I mean, you know, again, with all due respect, you know, there's academics that are out here, there are policymakers that are out there that never treated one patient and yet are telling us what to do. That's a fallacy. We don't need to deal with those folks. In fact, don't even address it, right? Because we know what we're dealing with. You guys are the experts, right? But in other words, quote unquote experts, we're practitioners. We're saving lives, and we're serving our purpose and serving the people in the community. So let's not be experts, and let's just learn from each other. And our failures are where it is where I spend most of my time is my failures. because that's where I learn and that's where growth happens. And again, you know, all you can do is practice enough things to prepare for that Black Swan event. Stay informed. These conferences are meant for that, right? I don't know if you understand the concept between, there's a concept called Fat Tony and I think it's Dr. Juan or something like that. But have you heard of the Fat Tony concept? Oh my gosh. Fat Tony is very a shrewd guy. He's probably Italian, heavy set, easygoing type of guy. Where you have a Dr. Juan, I believe, would be the complete opposite. Very stringent, you know, they call these guys nerdy in a way, whatever. And it's not that both of them are not subject to failing. Both of them are. But it's just that Fat Tony, when he fails, he doesn't fail as hard as Dr. John. The reason being is because he's open, he's flexible, he gets things. This is your chance, ladies and gentlemen, to be in a space like this, to start getting information, to interact with each other. I think one of the most important things about developing relationships is being humble and being related with one another. We all are dealing with the same things, guys. No one here knows anything more. It's like we've just been here longer, right? You've been dealing with this a little longer, so watch for this. You know, that's what we're here for. So be informed. These spaces are the places to be. So it would not be a good idea to be practicing in a silo and not reaching out to other DPC practitioners. So before I end, I don't know if some of you guys seen some of this post that's going on Facebook. You know, Dr. Gross asked me, you know, Sidney, you know, I knew you for a few years now, and you've been talking about this Haiti project that you're doing. And I wanted to spend the last few minutes to talk about the work that I do in Haiti, just briefly, because direct primary care offered me an opportunity to have the freedom to do it. But more importantly, being in the front lines, you know, for the past over 10 years now, I've been in Haiti looking at issues around healthcare. And we're talking about not having access, quality, and things like that here in the States, but when you go to Haiti, it really puts things into perspective, and you know, and it really does. For me, it did. My parents are Haitian. I was born in Brooklyn, New York, and you know, we worked very hard to come to this point, and I would be remiss not to share it with my colleagues and friends that are here. So direct primary care allowed me to do some work, and now there's an ongoing campaign about making a difference. And they've actually pushed this on social media on making a difference. So if you haven't gone, you should check it out. But I want to share a video with you that's going to say it all. Oh, there you go.
Is the first step towards a happy life. Making the people of Haiti healthier is a key step towards improving life expectancy. Life expectancy is the purpose that drives Santé Nu. We are a U.S. logistics company that uses technology to improve healthcare in Haiti. By linking the emergency care needs of those traveling to Haiti to the primary care needs of loved ones residing in Haiti. When enrolled in the Santé Nu service, you can add up to 4 loved ones residing in Haiti to receive primary care. We know there are 3 million Haitians living outside of Haiti. If they add 4 loved ones residing in Haiti to receive primary care, then 12 million Haitians will have access to primary health care. At Santé Nu, our mission is to improve Haiti's Human Development Index. To us, it is more than an index. It represents a goal to make lives better for all Haitians. We believe in the power of technology to drive logistics in improving healthcare. We go beyond the provisioning of treatments and medical supplies. We believe a commitment towards sustainability is a key in promoting healthy lifestyles. A focus on the improvement of healthcare infrastructure, coverage, and preventative care will make the health system stronger as a whole, resulting in improved human development. What's more striking is the fact that this approach is sustainable, but it begins with you. We are Santé Nu.
So, ladies and gentlemen, when I first started with direct primary care, I was always a practitioner who acted local and think globally. And I said to myself, we screwed it up here in this country, right? We did. And now we're trying to fix it. And we think about access, we think about quality, and we think about what we do as direct primary care doctors. And then we go to places like Haiti, who they haven't had the opportunity to get started yet. Why would we create a system for them that we already know that don't work? So my mission is to have a direct primary care influence in Haiti. They deserve humanity just like we have humanity here in medicine with direct primary care. That's what we do. We're bringing humanity back to healthcare. So this concept of allowing the families of Haitian descent who do travel to Haiti back and forth to have emergency services if they had a medical emergency or a trauma emergency in Haiti, that's where we start. And then their loved ones who live in Haiti get primary care. That is something new. That's what I've been tinkering around for the past 10, 12 years. That is what I'm about. And direct primary care has allowed me to have the freedom to think this way, to make huge impact. So your roles, everybody, you get an opportunity here to impact not only your immediate community, but you get to impact communities around the world. So direct primary care global is where I am, and this is the space that I've been living in all my life. And I believe we can get there. And it's only through you guys' support and commitment to addressing what we call the Human Developmental Index in those countries. Because Haiti's problems is Dominican's problem, is Jamaica's problem, is Africa, all the countries in Africa's problems. We're not gonna stop until we go to India, right? Because one of the co-founders of Santé Nu is Indian. Because he believes that this is a problem that needs to be addressed around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate your attention.
We have one question at the microphone here.
You had mentioned the issue on the pricing. I mean, I think that's the most challenging part of the whole thing. I have a lot of Medicare patients, and a lot of them, they barely can pay for their supplement, or they get the one that, the Advantage plan where they don't pay anything. It's finding that balance of, okay, if I was in their shoes, how much would I be willing to pay? I don't know. I'm thinking, would I be willing to pay $1,200 a year if I went to see them twice in a year? I mean, that's the dilemma. Until they get sick, they don't always see the value. I mean, we understand the value, but they don't. I mean, I guess that is what it is. You have to wait it out, and that's why you have a 3-year plan, I suppose. But what's your thoughts on that?
So I was going to actually have every person would be the same price when I first was going to open. And then I started asking people in my community, and ask people you don't know, because people that you do know are going to give you different answers than people you don't know. So we asked a friend to hold a happy hour. I brought over wine, and people in the community that I'd never met before heard my spiel and then gave me their opinions. And then it was actually my little sisters who made me change my pricing, because they were in their 20s and said, I'm healthy, I never go to the doctor. Why would I pay that price? So then we sat at a table and went through all the pricing options and what it would mean until we settled on a price that they felt was fair. for being healthy in 20. And I will say I have a lot of 20-year-olds, which is a reason why I actually have a lower price point than I thought I would, because that's a bigger section than I thought I was going to have. Because they do get sick, and typically, especially in Dallas, they're young professionals. They don't have time to go to the urgent care. They don't have time to be sick. So they're used to paying everything in monthly memberships, whether it's Netflix, Disney Plus, Hulu, you may name it, right? So they're used to these monthly memberships, and they're able to fit it into their budget, and it makes sense for them. But in terms of pricing for other people too, which is one of our dinner table discussions every night, is if we need to price more, I worry I'm going to price people out that need my services the most. So you can always get creative with that too. There's nothing wrong with doing some charity care, allowing some groups, they actually let people buy memberships for other members of their community, and then you can use that money for people. I've had a patient pay for a patient he's never met, their son's echo. There is nothing wrong with being creative.
So we have time for one last question.
Hi. Thank you again so much for sharing your stories, your successes, the failures. My question has to do not so much with the pricing, but how do you guys deal with, or how did you set up in your initial applications for the membership? Is it just cancel anytime you want? Is it, they have to be a member for a minimum amount of time? Because it sounds like, especially with the black swan events that can occur, they can leave in an exodus. So how do you deal with that? Especially, what if you have those patients that, they sign up this month and then they're gone for 5 months and then they want to come back, 6 months later? Is that a problem for you guys, and how do you deal with that?
Great question. So to answer the first part, price setting, it's really about, again, tinkering around, figuring out what works. Just put something out there. We have enough information historically, and we also see a lot of practices out there. The average is about $77 a month. So set something that you feel that may work, but don't be attached to it, right? So be willing to change it immediately once you realize it doesn't work, and get the feedback of your patients. In terms of the contract, for us, the way we do it is that if you don't cancel before the first month, then you have to pay a cancellation fee, right? So we introduce a cancellation fee. So again, a way to manage the risk in a way, because we understood that later on. I mean, we didn't introduce a cancellation fee until probably a year into our DPC practice, because people were just coming in, they get everything they wanted and then left, right, so to speak, the first month. So we did that. Again, some of the other technical questions you're asking, the DPC lawyers really support us a lot. Atlas MD is an awesome resource that I use, that they support me in terms of understanding what are the legal ramifications of doing certain things to prevent people to either leave the program or to abuse the system, so to speak. So I would definitely reach out to them as well.
And it is a state-to-state question. Make sure your accountant may know the answer to in terms of how you can bill a patient. If you're allowed to bill for a certain number of months at a time or in advance, if you have to bill proactively, retroactively. So that is a state-to-state issue. A good example, in my opinion, is look at how gyms are billing. So if your gym is able to create registration fees, cancellation fees, bill chunks at a time, so you have a minimum that you can sign up for, there's a chance you could too. But if no gym does that, you probably can't do it either. And I also use that example for my patients too. If they want to leave, they can leave. I ask them to give me a 30-day notice. I'm flexible. If they have an urgent job change and they're leaving in a week and they prove it to me, that's fine. I won't. But I have a re-registration fee versus a cancellation fee.
So how about a big round of applause for our panel?